Hello, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube, and welcome to another episode of Fanalysis Lite, Star Wars. I am Reti 4, this is Evan over 95.
Hello.
And this is Jen Sarai 1.
I got a haircut.
Today we're going to be having a look back on some of these two's versus video matchups they've covered in the past, and what we would want to or what they specifically would want to change and discuss about them in minor detail, because we thought it would be fun. I will be joining in where I can, but these two wanted me here for some reason, so we'll see how that goes.
It'll be interesting.
Third wheel.
Yeah, the third wheel.
You know how there's the light, the dark, and the balance? You're our balance for today, Callan.
Sure, we'll go with that.
And I am the darkness.
First matchup.
Of course you are, Connor. You're always the darkness.
So yeah, the first matchup you wanted to discuss, guys, which was it?
The first matchup is going to be one of my older videos, the versus Short Broken Butchers, Darth Malgus versus Darth Vader. My opinion on this matchup has actually changed. In the original video, I pushed the idea that Vader would beat Malgus because I considered his lightsaber technique to be superior and his defensive strategies to be a good foil for Malgus's bulldozer rush. But today, my opinion has changed because Vader's technique is superior. He is a much more refined duelist, but so much of his effectiveness is predicated on that scary superhuman strength advantage. The problem is that he doesn't have that advantage over Malgus. Malgus may not be as strong or as durable as Vader, but he's close enough that he can contend, and he doesn't have any of Vader's weaknesses, least of all a frickin' self-destruct switch right in the center of his chest. So, any input, guys?
I'd have to agree with it. The weakness, when you first made the video, the weakness or difference in physicality and relative disparity in actual strength output lined up together, I think made that, as well coupled with Malgus's battlefield experience, made for a powerful package against Vader specifically. You know, he would have fought people vaguely akin to Vader in style, whereas Vader, while his package is kind of suited to
would he have though
anyone,
well,
to an
Malgus
extent.
has fought and killed other Sith Lords as well, and lots of Sith Lords have the cyber in that era have this Vader-style cybernetics. Malgus is not alone.
Better cybernetics as well.
Yeah, but just
Vader's
because
was
they
a
have,
rush job,
but the big thing with that, at least in my opinion, is yes, they may have Vader's physical capabilities in a similar regard, but I think the big difference with these two is the skill differential. And I'm not saying I disagree with the verdict entirely. This is actually a matchup I've never been completely 100% sure on one way or the other. But I do think Vader's skill advantage would largely make up for it, in my opinion.
I'm of the same opinion. I was agreeing with the actual point about the physicality and handicap point being switched specifically, because I'm on the same fence. I couldn't tell which one of them would have like a sheer advantage over the other, based on all the points covered. They're very, very similar in skill level, even if that manifests in very different ways.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's also the fact that a lot of the stuff that Malgus does, like his style mechanics, are very well suited for contending with Vader, because what Vader's whole shtick is because of his restricted agility and dexterity, because of his cumbersome prosthetics, his whole fighting style is based around using his scary cyborg strength to shove his enemies off balance before they have a chance to lay into him. He just steps into attacks with a shunt block, knocks you on your ass, and then starts wailing on you. The problem is that he can't reliably interrupt Malgus's attack chains because Malgus is similarly strong. And the other thing is the fact that Malgus does a lot of the stuff that Vader has proven to be vulnerable to. It's like one of the things you can do against Vader is strike his blade and then hit him with physical combat integration. Like we got the thing in Return of the Jedi where Luke kicks Vader down the stairs. Malgus does shit like that all the time. And the other thing is that Malgus's force powers, he may not be quite as inventive in how he uses them, but he is still very clever in his own right, and he has a similar level of magnitude. And more than anything else, he's got the Force lightning. And it's not like he's just shooting
the
off
lightning
like
factors.
Yeah. It's not like
Yeah.
he's just shooting off a little Dooku-style burst. It's like he's unleashing storms of Force lightning. It's the sort of thing where it's like Vader would still be a serious contender against Malgus. This is not a mismatch. They are very much equals, and in fact, Vader is more strategically viable. He's more intelligent. He's more defensive. But I kind of see this as being a lot like the fight between Dooku and Anakin in Revenge of the Sith, where Dooku, by all rights, should have won that fight, but Anakin was able to use his focused power to basically just bully through Dooku's interference and overpowered him. I think Malgus would do the same thing against Vader. He'd just bully through Vader's interference and just lay into him.
That or Malgus would go too blinkered and lose sight.
Very possible.
And lose sight of maybe a deft strike from Vader. It could go either way. But yeah, I agree with the assessment there. He's a character that would be well equipped to take Vader, particularly in a battlefield scenario. That's for sure. Vader is very calm, composed, controlled. He sets the arena. He approaches how he chooses to. He's methodical. If Malgus can get around that with his sheer brutality, precise brutality, because both of them have that in spades, then I think that could go either way.
Yeah. The big difference between them is that Malgus is actually prepared for engagements with people who are on his own level in terms of skill, power, and physicality because of the era in which he lives. This guy was killing Jedi on a regular basis for 20 years. Vader, he's just as he was as Anakin Skywalker, he's operating under the conceit that he is the most physically powerful combatant in his setting. There is no one who can match him. And the second he meets someone who can overwhelm his strength, i.e. Luke, he lost. Even though Luke was so far inferior to him, he was able to channel his rage and overmatch Vader's strength. And as a result, basically the surest way to undercut Darth Vader is to take away his strength advantage. So the fighters he's weakest against are, other strength-based bulldozers on his own level because he's not prepared for that engagement because he's used to being the only strength-based bulldozer in his setting.
I think the psychological factor played the biggest advantage for Luke in that fight. But you're right.
I would agree with that. If Vader was going all out with force enhancement against Luke, he would have crushed him. But it still demonstrated Vader's practical weakness. If he comes up against someone that he can't overpower, someone who is actually truly is stronger than him, he's going to have some major problems.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Malgus
that's the thing I think that makes most sense. The fact that Malgus has spent decades fighting against people, not all on his level, obviously, most were beneath, but there will have been people where he does run up against them and then have to fight them to a standstill. We've seen it happen twice, at least to a certain extent, on screen.
Yeah.
Whereas Vader, like you said, he's more of the mop-up crew. He goes in and takes out people who are lesser than him, even in groups.
Yeah.
He's not had that full-on decade-long experience.
Yeah, it's like Vader
he rarely faces equals.
Yeah, he's not resting on his laurels. He is preparing for confrontations with equals. Like if you look at his training in Shadows of the Empire with the ASP-19 dueling droids, it's like he's like, okay, I need to challenge myself. I need to get better. Bring in 4 droids.
Yeah, he's practicing, but again, it is all practice. He's never had that chance, from the nature of his era, to take on truly challenging opponents, and at least anywhere near the amount that Malgus is. So that is what brings up the skill disparity to me. And power.
The thing is that Vader's experience is still very meaningful, but the problem is that most of the combatants he's fought are Yoda-style combatants, speed-based, dexterity-based Jedi who are trying to blitz his defenses. He's not fought someone like Malgus, who it's like both Vader and Malgus have that same core tactic of basically striking the opponent's raised block with the intention of staggering them back with brute strength. It's like Vader's never faced an opponent where he can't strike your raised block and stagger you back 10 feet. And Malgus, could he stagger him back 10 feet? No. If the two of them got into a blade lock, I could see Vader edging out because I do think he is a bit stronger than Malgus because of his prosthetic limbs. But if the two of them just standing there slugging it out, they're on par.
I'd agree.
It's kind of like in Marvel, like Juggernaut versus Hulk situation, just hitting each other, just like grappling sort of deal.
Yeah. In fact, Hulk versus Juggernaut is actually a perfect analog for this. Malgus is the Hulk. the angrier he gets, the more powerful he becomes. Vader is Juggernaut. He's got better armor, he's more experienced, but his performance level is capped.
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough.
Well,
So
there you go.
any more closing thoughts on that one, or should we move on to the next match?
I've said everything I want to say, so
Cool.
Does anyone have anything to add? No? Okay.
Not beyond what
I
you've
think we
already
covered
no.
just about everything was pretty solid. So next up, we have one from my catalog. I did this one a few seasons ago, and it is Count Dooku versus Kyle Katarn. Now, unlike Connor with his Vader v Malgus video, I do not disagree. You know, my verdict still stands, my opinion on it. I still believe that Kyle would edge out a victory against Dooku. What I want to address specifically with this matchup was a complaint I have in the sense that the main focal point for why I was arguing Kyle would win wasn't really explained as well as I would have liked. So, you know, I hate spoiling these things, but the big crux of my argument for that video was you have two combatants who are basically evenly matched in almost every conceivable notion, you know, lightsaber combat, experience, force abilities, force power. However, what separates them is that Kyle Katarn is more physically fit and is significantly younger. And as a result, would win in a physical bout, which when you add all that put all those factors together, would give him the edge. The big thing, though, is in that actual video, I kind of just said Kyle Katarn is better physicality, therefore he wins, end of story. I really would like to just take a sec to explain more thoroughly what I meant by that. And the thing what I really just want to hammer in is we have several instances where Dooku has been brought to heel, well, or at least pushed very hard by someone who is in better physical condition than him, i.e. Anakin Skywalker and even to a degree Obi-Wan Kenobi. And when you take that into account and then you have someone who could match him in all other areas, he can't leverage advantage in lightsaber combat or force abilities here, it's just a done conclusion. He'll burn himself out. He'll run out of stamina. Meanwhile, Kyle Katarn would still be relatively fresh and would capitalize on his weakness. But yeah, like I said, in that video, I don't feel I explained that very well, and that's all on me. You guys have anything to add to that?
No,
Sorry, I was kind of waffling there for a second.
No, it's fine.
That's fine.
It has to be explained. No, I agree with the outcome on that one, and I definitely agree with the reason. You're right in saying that both of them are pretty much exactly dead on every single aspect because they
in our opinion, of course.
Yeah, of
you know,
course,
a lot of people disagree with me on that. I was like, there's no way Dooku, you know, Kyle's on Dooku's level. Well, in my opinion, he is. But regardless,
yeah, of course.
Yeah,
All of these
the
are
Kyle
always our
Katarn
opinions.
feature. Kyle Katarn, as of Legacy of the Force, that guy is very much on Dooku's level. It's like he's a beast.
I mean, he's the Count Dooku of his era, to be fair. You know, we say about how Jane is
Yeah.
the Mace. You know, he's very much the Count Dooku in terms of how they stand in their respective orders and eras. His abilities line up parallel in almost every way. I can't think of anything where as you said in the video, where any particular strength of one outweighs the others outside of the physical and youth factor.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think there's anything to add to that one. What's up for the next
No,
one?
I think I said my piece. I was just wondering if you guys had anything else to add, but I'm actually glad we're all on the same table.
Yeah,
So
I'm with you on that one.
But like I said,
100%.
the advantage itself, like in that video, was not very well explained. So I apologize for that, but hopefully we were able to provide a little more insight on that.
And it still stands as one of your most interesting matchups because they have so many commonalities, but they're balanced out by stark differences. They're both very intelligent strategic operatives, but Dooku is, you know, he's the pure duelist. It's very linear, straightforward. His technique, it's nuanced, but it's singular. He does only one thing. He just does that one thing so amazingly well that, you know, he adapts it for different situations by changing the nuances, whereas Kyle Katarn has loads of combat experience against loads of different kinds of fighters and has basically just been picking up additional techniques and additional skills over the course of his career, and he's basically able to completely reconfigure his style to be whatever he needs it to be in the moment. It's like you see this in gameplay with the strong, medium, and fast styles. He's switching between techniques on the fly, whereas with Dooku, it's more about the specific type of move he's performing right here, right now, but his overall technique stays consistent. But in his own way, he's no less flexible than Kyle is.
Mm-hmm.
Just how they apply it.
Exactly. I mean, really, what the match really comes down to was just a match. Like when I was constructing it, really just was logistics. when you have when you have people who are matched up in every conceivable way except one, where you have one advantage, well, that one advantage added to everything else you have is gonna push you to victory. That's just how it works. You take two sevens, you add a 1 to one of them, 8. 8's higher than 7.
Especially considering it wasn't like a close thing. It wasn't like Catan had like 10 years on Dooku. He had a good 30, 40 years over him. He was operating in his physical prime still, even if it was almost at the tail edge of that.
More
Dooku
like, I mean, he was pushing 60 during Legacy, so it was
at
more
his
like
final point, yeah, definitely. So yeah, I guess it would be less than that. But it wasn't like
it's still
5
a lot.
years or anything like that. It was a significant jump, depending on where you take the characters.
Yeah, and like I said, we have instances of people bringing Dooku to heel because of physical advantage. Now, I'm not saying for a second that Kyle would have the same physical advantage over Dooku that Anakin had. That's like, I think we could all agree that Revenge of the Sith Anakin is in better physical condition than Legacy Kyle. Am I right?
Apart from anything else, his style lends itself to it more. Katan's more of a... He's not an man, but he applies himself more generally than Anakin does, who is himself a specialist. Mm-hmm. Whereas Dooku, the leverage advantage in that regard is less focused for Kyle, so he can put up more of a long-term fight, as you say in the video, against him. It's just a case of the slog match, which is always the case with Dooku pretty much. If he meets someone who can force that slog match, he's going to retreat. It's almost always the case. Mm-hmm. Now, whether or not he'd be able to succeed in that, I think he would personally for Catan. But yeah, that's neither here or there. He loses effectively. Yeah, in our opinion.
Yeah, exactly. And we're not saying that to like bash Dooku or anything. That's just an aspect of his character. Guys, he's an old man. Old people can't maintain fights for very long. Even in the Star Wars universe.
The fact that he's able to contend with the people he does contend with is absolutely amazing. Yeah, it's like the fact that he's able to do what he does despite being so old is like, holy shit. But at the end of the day, he is ultimately beholden to his old age.
Mm-hmm. And if he were to go up against someone who can match him in every regard, but that physical area, well, guess what's going to happen? Yep. But again, that's just how we felt, and I apologize to everyone watching that I did not explain it as thoroughly as I could have. So that's everything I have to say about that. Any closing thoughts?
No, I think we covered that pretty
Christopher
well.
Lee.
Okay, well then let's get rolling.
Third match.
The next matchup on our list is one of mine again. Again, talking Darth Vader. It is Exar Kun versus Darth Vader, but specifically the remake version of the fight I did. It's not that my conclusion has changed, it's that my argument has changed. In that video, my whole argument for why Exar Kun gets the edge over Vader is because he's super unpredictable and defeats Vader's pattern recognition-based approach to lightsaber combat, whereas today, my argument would be focused on style mechanics, not on predictability. Mm-hmm. So the reason why I think Exar Kun can beat Vader is because his style mechanics work. As already mentioned, Vader's style is based around interrupting the opponent's attack chains and shoving them off balance with his scary robot strength. The problem is that against Exar Kun, he can't do this reliably. Against Exar Kun's baseline lightsaber technique, Exar Kun was slugging it out with his era's reigning master of Gem So, Ulic Qel-Droma. He is a physically powerful opponent. Vader would not be able to definitively overpower him. That being said, if the two of them slugged it out and Exar Kun did not have his saber staff or an extra blade or anything, I do think Vader would win in the long run, but Exar Kun would still give him a damn good fight. What breaks it for Vader is the Trakata saber staff, because the problem is that when your fighting style is essentially based around bracing up against the opponent and overpowering them with blade binding and blade locking, well, you're facing a guy who his lightsaber blade can shorten, lengthen, or become intangible. Basically, Exar Kun's Trakata saber staff allows him to immediately break out of the bind and just phase through Vader's defenses by just shortening his blade around Vader's, and Vader won't be able to get a bead on him and interrupt his attack chains. Basically, Exar Kun fights like a ghost. And the other thing Exar Kun has going for him is his Trakata saber staff is actually good for neutralizing Vader's armor. Vader's armor is the sort of thing where anything that isn't a hacking cleave or a thrust is only going to leave a shallow cut or pitting on the plating. It's like basically it'll just piss him off. It won't actually hurt him. Whereas Exar Kun, by basically shortening down his blade and then igniting it into Vader's chest, he's performing thrusts with zero effort just by clicking a button. It's like he can just phase through Vader's defenses and phase through Vader's armor. He would just fuck him up on so many levels. It's like the problem, it's like the core aspect of my original argument is basically that Vader can't get a bead on Exar Kun, and that is true, but I would have discussed this in a mechanical fashion, not in a Vader can't understand Exar Kun's attack vectors fashion. Thoughts?
Definitely.
Fair enough.
We agree, and it's like, sorry, I definitely think another factor, like, you know, that to consider too is just how radically different Exar Kun is from Vader's typical opponents. Like we were talking earlier about how Malgus differs but still has certain similarities. Exar Kun is like completely unlike anything Vader has ever faced, and I think the mechanics of that do play a significant part. Like Vader has never faced a Trakata stylist who uses sorcery, so
yeah,
that's something to consider.
The impact of his artifact enhanced sorcery as well, or artifact granted sorcery, even.
Just the sorcery in general, not just the artifact.
The raw power would help. Without them, I definitely think it's Vader's game, but with them as well, it's just another edge that leans him in line with Vader, managing to match his already weakened powers from being locked in the suit, which is one of his biggest weaknesses. You know,
well,
Kun,
weakened.
Well, yeah, of course. Potential cut off. He was never going to be as powerful as he could be. And because of that, I think Exar Kun, with these advantages, can just levy so much against him that Vader isn't prepared for, or at least not enough that it would be a decisive victory. I put these two very much. It's one of those ones where it could go either way. I just lean, and this is rare with Exar Kun actually. I lean more towards him as the victor in this particular instance.
Yeah,
because the thing about
sorcerer versus warrior dynamic is always a very tricky one, because it depends entirely on which combatants you're talking about within the specific context.
And this fight is still very much a contest of equals, because the thing about Exar, and it's still a very narrow thing, because the thing about Exar Kun's Trakata Saber Staff is its weaknesses never came up, it never failed him as a trump card, but based on how that style is constructed, we can infer its weaknesses. His success is predicated on timing and control, which means that if you successfully manage to interrupt his attack chains, well, suddenly he's just gotten eviscerated by his own weapon because he just lengthened the blade into his own chest.
That and the fact that it's very hit or miss tactic. If Vader sees it coming or responds fast enough, or has it, if even the slightest margin for error gets pushed against Kun's favor, he's dead. It's an all or nothing tactic.
Yeah,
it's very interesting, because it's either he successfully nullifies your style and phases through your defenses, or his attack chains are interrupted and he's eviscerated by his own weapon.
It's basically one of those fights that can either take 15 minutes or 15 seconds.
Yeah, depending on how the opponents clash up. It's an interesting one.
Yeah, but overall, I do favor Exar Kun, because he is prepared for everything that Vader's bringing to the table. He has, to a certain extent, seen it all before from the other people he's fought, Ulic Qel-Droma and Vodosiask Boss. But Vader hasn't seen anything that Kun is bringing on, because, well, the only thing that, it's like Vader is aware of Sith sorcery, but he's not been exposed to the full-on, I have a Sith amulet that shoots Iron Man pulse blasts at you.
Not even if you count his career as Anakin, nothing even resembling that. Because
Vader's only been exposed to the traditional Sith powers. So it's like the scary invasive telekinesis, the scary invasive telepathy, and Force lightning. He's not been exposed to, I'll just tear a rift in the fabric of reality and summon demons.
So
just Sauron eye, just shadowed people coming out of the Nazgul just rising, like Vader's like, what the hell?
Yeah, it would be a bit of a surprise for him. But is there anything else you want to close on that one?
No, that's pretty much everything I have to say. I would have predicated my argument on mechanics, not predictability. That's the big difference for me.
All right, then. Going back to one of Evan's then for the next.
Yes, next up we have one that is rather infamous from the, the ones I've produced, and that is Hoth versus Darth Bane. Now, again, my verdict, although my verdict has wavered once or twice, I still do stand firmly in my decision to have Hoth be the victor. That said, I once again, this is a case where there was something I addressed that I think could have been addressed better. So again, my focal point for the victory in this matchup was on a specific factor, that being Lord Hoth's experience and tactical prowess overriding Darth Bane's raw power. Now, the big thing with that is, and Reti, you even helped with this one, explaining the exact tactical differences between them. That said, I would like to bring up is just the factor of how tactics can overwhelm power, because I felt like that probably wasn't explained as well as it should have been. Now, the big thing with that is, okay, first of all, and people have accused me of this, me and everyone else here, we are all well aware that someone with greater power can defeat someone with greater tactical sensibilities just as easily as someone with greater tactical sensibilities can defeat someone with greater power. That's just a given. The main point I was trying to get to in that video is how these specific attributes line up in the context of these two characters. Here you have Lord Hoth, someone who's far more experienced than Darth Bane and has had a lot more experience dealing with the kind of tactics that Bane employs, against Darth Bane, who by contrast has never really faced an acclaimed military genius with decades of combat experience, who's also a battle master, I might add, matching up against him. And here's another thing to consider. Bane has also been, we have had examples of Bane being brought to heel by someone with greater experience than him in certain areas. Kasim, even the Jedi who fought him on, what was the planet? What was the planet? Tython. I almost said Tethan. That didn't sound right. Tython. So this is a consistent aspect of his character. And at the end of the day, I just felt that Lord Hoth's tactics would prevail. What do you guys think?
For me, it's the experience factor over the tactics, which definitely play a huge role. But it's the fact that everything Bane is going to be bringing to the fight, Hoth will have seen just many times, even if it's not on exactly the same level. He's seen it before and he can prepare for it. The biggest, because again, I think the biggest disparity people have, or the biggest question people have with this verdict is that Bane's feats have been shown on page so much more. The level of power and the feats at his disposal is far outstrips Hoth. But for me, as with so many characters, we have to. And
you helped me design the script too.
Yeah, we had to. You have to infer like so much more with the characters that have less presented for them. And the one kind of feat we do have in concrete for Hoth puts him so far above pretty much anyone we've seen, like in the context that it is given, so far ludicrously above that I had to give the experience factor so much more weight than I would otherwise, because he literally, without, I can't remember exactly he does, but without even like breaking a sweat or any attention whatsoever, his friend has just died. He's seeing the world coming to like a crushing end around him. He's about to lose the battle, and then someone comes at him from behind. He just, without even looking at them, 4 stasis fields them behind him, gets one of their, knowing that one of their allies, if he does that, would cut them down, and then just kills the other person behind him after that's done. Meanwhile, he's distraught. He's losing the battle. His focus is elsewhere. He's just lost his best friend, seconds beforehand, pretty much. This is the sort of person that should, at this point, at least have to be in a last stand slog match, and he's just kind of calmly assessing the situation, killing 2 people behind him without even turning in to face them, and that level of
that's pretty insane.
Yeah, that level of just comfort on the battlefield has not been displayed by pretty much any other character that we've seen. So I don't think it's on top of the fact that he's a battle master, on top of the fact that he's had decades of experience, on top of the way everyone in the Order looks at and talks about him, I feel like he should be given the benefit of the doubt in some of his abilities. He's at least the Mace Windu of his era, as far as I'm concerned. And,
at least.
That is more than enough to take on Bane, at least on the face value of it, without considering everything else that goes on top.
Lord Hoth is he's very similar to Warb Null in that it's essentially a 1 + 1 = 2 analyses. You just take the few accolades and think about, okay, so if he's got these things, what are all of the other things that he has by necessity to have these things? And then from that, you're able to to paint a picture of him just through extrapolation. It's like that particular feat gives us a very good idea for his power level, so we know the level he's operating on. We know for a fact that he's an acclaimed battle master, so mastery of all 7 forms. And we got a very good understanding of his military career, even if the details are vague. He's been at war with the Sith for decades. He's the guy who basically founded the Jedi Army of Light. He's almost like a light side Malgus, in that, sure, not every single opponent he's fighting is on his level. Like the 2 people he kills in that bit clearly are not on his level. But because he's been fighting for so long, it's the fact of the matter is there's no way he couldn't have engaged someone on his own level at some point, because there are Sith Lords who are on his level. Kasim, Lord Khan, Cordus, Bane himself.
Yeah, and a lot of people like to bring up the fact that Bane's stated to be vastly superior than all the members of the Brotherhood, and it's like, yes, but at the same time, I think they're not giving people, those Brotherhood Sith, a lot of credit.
Yeah.
Like Bane himself even remarks that Lord Khan was not weak when Zana asked him about it. Like, he respects Khan's power, and I think that says a lot. And let's not forget, he did almost get his ass kicked by Kasim.
Yeah. So it's like the other Sith Lords may not have been as powerful as Bane in a raw sense, but they still had highly developed skills, and they still had a huge amount of experience doing what they did within their respective roles. It's like, what do you think Kasim was doing before Khan put him in the academy as the lightsaber instructor? Well, he was probably Khan's martial enforcer, his Darth Maul on roids.
I think the big thing most people take issue with is the fact that all of this is speculative. We don't have any hard evidence or hard, like, one-on-one comparative feats to compare with. And also the fact that you said about Kasim there, about the fact that Bane took him on when he was comparatively way further into his early on into his career. Later on, Supreme Master Bane is a bit of a different picture. But the thing is, when you get to that level of Bane, he's had almost as much experience, because he doesn't go into massive fights after that point. The Typhon fight, he would have died if he didn't have the obelisk armor, or at least he would have carried himself thoroughly different.
The book makes an effort to point out.
Yeah. So there are these little factors that you could go either way on, I guess. But for me personally, I think the rest of us as well, at least us 3 here, not necessarily Matt and Antoine, they'll have to speak for themselves elsewhere, because I know they disagree with us on a lot of things to do with Bane. But yeah, to me, Hoth just, the comfort he feels on the battlefield compared to Bane, who is always more aware and who has stumbled against far inferior opponents even in his later years as well. Bane does some really stupid things on occasion. I just think that those 2 factors put together make it entirely reasonable that Hoth's minor feats could be scaled up. Personally,
again, it is all conjecture, but again, we just feel that the conjecture is,
reasonable.
What's the word? Reasonable. Thank you.
Yeah. And I would agree with that, because the other thing about Bane is that Bane's experience is definitely meaningful. He has been in a lot of different combat situations, but all in all, by the time he got killed on Umbria, the number of serious lightsaber duels he participated in could be tallied up with the fingers on one hand. Whereas
many of which he either didn't win or had help. That's worth pointing out.
Yeah. It's like Bane's success is very much predicated on the skill that he developed through training. And that's not to say that his developed skill is anything to thumb your nose at. He is almost certainly his era's reigning master of Gem So. Like, I don't think anyone's going to question. Yeah, he's nothing to thumb your nose at. But at the same time, he makes a lot of mistakes that, Hoth is optimized to exploit. Like, you compared the fight to Chaos Enderach versus Vindican from the Return trailer, and I agree with that. Vindican, a lot like Bane, highly skilled, very well developed, very good balance of skills, like definitely a force to be reckoned with. But against Chaos Enderach, he just didn't know when to stop and practically hurled himself onto that blue lightsaber blade.
Which isn't a direct comparison, obviously, before anyone leaps down our throats. That is obviously
that was just like the closest I was trying to, the closest possible, equivalent that I was trying to to make.
It's like Bane
And
is the sort of fighter who won't make any technical mistakes in terms of how he executes his style, but he will make tactical mistakes. He will overextend. He doesn't know when to stop. He does have a habit of biting off more than he can chew.
He's also supremely arrogant because he's so intelligent, and that often pays off for him. When it doesn't pay off for him, it doesn't pay off for him in a spectacular way.
yeah, like it is also worth pointing out that we have never actually seen Bane being matched up against a true tactical genius. Really, the closest we ever get is when he sort of outsmarts Khan with his pretending to be mind-controlled thing, but that's not combat. Give me a break.
Yeah. It's like, the thing is that when Bane, so many people are treating Bane's fight with Sirac as his baseline tactics. No, that's what Bane does when he spends like weeks or months prepping for a fight, trying to understand his opponent and get himself into the zone. Whenever you drop him in cold without that prep time, i.e. his fight against Kasim, it's like his fight against Kasim on Rakata Prime was definitely an impressive feat from a purely swordsman, pure lightsaber combat standpoint. But as far as his tactics go, all he did was just herd Kasim deeper into the temple so he couldn't flee. He wasn't actually trying to manipulate him or get under his skin. He was just, okay, let's corner him and pound on him until he's dead. Like, that was the extent of his strategy in that fight. And the second Kasim popped the Jarkai, turned around, Bane was basically, well, it basically turned into, yeah, I'm winning, wham, 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 to shit.
He was relying on his own personal power too much, which I think is something that Bane does a lot, particularly in Obelisk armor, which again isn't the highest Bane. Bane learns from these mistakes, and later on is not like full on plowing in, making stupid mistakes the same way he did in his youth. But the fact that he has done, and the fact that was based on arrogance, it heavily kind of flavors the kind of presence of mind he brings to any kind of situation. Whereas Hoth, who, by the way, would make the same mistakes, I have no doubt, but his experience and just relaxed instinctive comfort in these environments, like, again, he's in his lowest possible point and kills someone behind him without even batting an eye. Yeah, they weren't exactly masters and they weren't anywhere near his level, but they were at least Sith warriors. We don't see that on that same, like, that bigger jump in pretty much any other character.
Darth Bane has not had as many opportunities to learn from his mistakes as Lord Hoth has. Like, I feel certain that if Bane had actually, risen to power like 20 years earlier and had actually fought in the war, he would have been a much different person. He probably would have been much more powerful, much more intelligent. He would have become his era's Darth Malgus. But as it stands, it's like, instead of continuing to develop as a warrior, he almost aborted that and switched over to, all right, I'm a schemer now. Covert ops, can't afford to get into fights.
But I mean, it's interesting because
before we sign off, sorry.
So it's interesting though, because I would almost always put Bane above Malgus as well. Like, the fact that his ability to raise his power and his skill through training alone is not to be underestimated. It is massively. The fact that he can even go against Hoth is mind-blowing, and he's going up against him in like 50-50 pretty much. It's just that, to me, Hoth edges it out. And the fact that he accomplished that without the experience tells you exactly what you need to know about Bane and his mindset and his character.
It's a true testament to be sure.
I just don't think that holds up against true experience, that's all.
And just one more thing I'd like to address before we move on, because people have brought this up in the comments for that video as well. Yes, it is strongly implied and even stated in some cases that Rasta Lasso was the best saber master of that era, which, I mean, is debatable to begin with. But yes, and Bane was able to sort of comfortably handle her. But I think something a lot of people don't quite get is Hoth and Lasso are very different combatants. Like, completely different. She is way below him when you really look at what she's capable of.
In an overall sense, for sure. Not necessarily sword.
Well, that's what I mean, in an overall sense.
It's like the difference between Rasta Lasso and Lord Hoth, the way I see it, is the difference between General Grievous and Count Dooku. Yes, General Grievous probably edges out Dooku as a saber combatant, only in terms of combat effectiveness. Like, in terms of developed skill, Dooku has the edge. But Dooku's able to turn that around because he's got force abilities and he's much better with the tactics. Whereas Grievous, he's got to rely on his theatrics. He can't afford to be defensive because that's giving the opponent a chance to do something against him. And Rasta Lasso is in that same boat. She can't afford to be the Obi Kenobi defensive fighter because she's so weak against the force. Like, so weak, she makes Kenobi look strong. So she's got to get right up in your face and rip you apart as quickly as she can. And it's actually shown in the novel that the only reason why Bane dealt with that is because of the Orbalisk armor. He could afford to focus on pure offense and just pound on her, because unless you hit him in very specific joints in his armor, you're not going to do anything to him.
No, massive cheat. So I just wanted to address that little difference between them before we move on. So yeah, I have nothing more to say on that. I agree with pretty much everything you guys have said. So,
but again, heavily speculative and entirely our opinion. So take it as you will.
Yeah,
as all of these are to an extent.
Yeah, but more so than a lot of the others, Lord Hoth versus Bane is a very opinionated one because it's so speculative. That being said, I agree with your speculation.
Likewise.
Thank you. Yes. Well, of course you agree, Reti.
I'm sure a million people in the comments won't. But yeah, give us your
anyway.
Yes. All right. The next matchup we're doing is one of my old matchups, like literally the second one I ever did. Darth Maul versus Dooku. In fact, I'm actually thinking I might go back and remake this one because, well, my opinion on the final verdict has not changed. This is Dooku's game, but my opinion on the Marshall verdict has. I should have given the Marshall edge to Dooku. The big problem is that this is when I was just getting started. I hadn't figured out the headcanon power scaling shit, so I literally did not know which way I went on the Marshall verdict when I made the video, and I literally scripted two separate bits where it's like Marshall edge to Dooku, Marshall edge to Maul, see what I think when I'm done reading it through, and I picked Maul because I figured he's more dedicated to lightsaber combat than Dooku, but in retrospect, incorrect. Maul is super, super dedicated, but Dooku is just as dedicated. Dooku is he's a passion-driven lightsaber duelist. He mastered this because he loves it. It's his favorite thing to do. He's a master force wielder, but that's not his first love. His first love is pulling out that beautiful curved lightsaber and igniting that plasma blade and poking it into someone's heart. That's Dooku's favorite thing to do. So, and in terms of how it's like I should have given the martial edge to Dooku, but not just because of that. It's also because of style mechanics, because I will say that Maul is good enough to contend with Dooku. He would give him a hard fight. The problem with Maul is that, firstly, the double-bladed lightsaber. It restricts him to those big, broad, sweeping hack-and-slash style cuts that Dooku can see coming a mile off and that his style is optimized to defend against. And the other thing is that Maul is essentially a hand-to-hand martial artist who wields his weapon as an extension of his body. So a big portion of his effectiveness is his, it's not just hitting you with his weapon, it's also punching you and kicking you. Whereas I don't think he'd be all that effective against Dooku, because so much of Maul's ability to engage you is about getting right up in your face so he can lay into you with both blades of his weapon, clock you in the head with the hilt, and kick you. Whereas Dooku's Makashi is all about controlling the distance, keeping the opponent at arm's length. Oh, you like to punch and kick? Well, you can't don't come any closer than this blade or I'll stab you. You can't punch or kick me when I'm keeping you 10 feet away from me.
Kick right into the lightsaber.
These two are in very different leagues as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, there's no question in my mind that within the first 30 seconds of the fight, Maul's double-sided saber would be two single sabers, because Dooku is just that's just the biggest target in the world for someone who's used to taking out the smallest targets in the world with casual ease. So there's that going for it as well. But the sheer focus is, like you said, the fact that
the skill differential
and the
experience,
and the experience as well.
Yeah, and the experience. Dooku is, Maul's more dedicated to physical combat, but Dooku overall, in terms of academic knowledge and everything, is way more experienced. Not,
Absolutely.
just the simple fact that he's decades older is one thing.
Yeah, and he spent his entire life in
we're training.
the order, training against hundreds of different Jedi,
Exactly.
thousands even. But the fact that as well that Maul was so focused on physical combat as well, with pairing that with his saber skills, Dooku is just going to lop his leg off the first time the opportunity he gets. This is not someone you come at with your hands and feet unless you are at least as good with the blade, which Maul just isn't.
Yeah,
No.
Maul is definitely a goddamn good fighter when it comes to engaging the contemporary Jedi of that era. We see that in the Duel of Fates. His weapon and style is perfect for contending with Ataru practitioners or Jem So, but against Makashi, linear, straightforward, back and forth, keep that lightsaber out in front of you, poke at the other guy. It's like his style and his weapon just aren't good for that, because it's like he can't contend with Dooku's blade binding techniques because his double blader's long handle might give him more leverage in the bind, but that extra blade restricts his movement. He can't. It's like the sort of technique-based takedown that Dooku used to bring down Kenobi in Episode 2, where he just engaged his blade, forced it out of line, and then nipped him on the side. It's like Darth Maul wouldn't be able to prevent Dooku from doing that to him because he wouldn't be able to get a good angle with that weapon because this extra blade is in my way. I can't get it to my other side. Shit.
It's one of the biggest weaknesses of the weapon. It's one of the biggest strengths of Makashi. So they're not going to ever match up well against each other.
No,
but yeah,
Juyo is really a bad choice to engage a Makashi practitioner with.
It is an interesting discussion because they're almost exact opposites, because Maul is a hand-to-hand martial artist who wields his body as an extension of his weapon, whereas Dooku is a lifelong swordsman who knows how to use physical combat. It's like if you took away the lightsabers and forced them to duke it out with hands and feet, Maul would frickin' waste Dooku. He's got the physical advantage. He's got a much more optimized hand-to-hand combat skill, whereas Dooku is very lightsaber-centric. But put the lightsabers in their hands, it's Dooku's game.
And we're just talking martial arts combat at the moment, guys. Once you factor in everything else,
it's not even remotely close on any level as far as I'm concerned.
No.
Darth Maul could definitely contend with Dooku, but what we're looking at is one of Dooku's fights with Ventress. He's not tussling. He's not going to be contending with Dooku for dominance. He'd be putting up a fight and then losing a limb.
Probably being humoured as he does it as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I completely agree. As you said, it's one of your earliest videos. I mean, it's your second video, so it was never going to be one of your best. But it's definitely interesting to discuss it now in retrospect for all the reasons we have.
Yeah. And I definitely do want to go back and redo this one because it's such an interesting matchup, even if it is a bit one-sided in favor of Dooku because, well,
He's
but at the same time,
it's plain and simple.
There are so many different factors at play. It's like Maul's hand-to-hand combat skill it's not something that turns the tables in his favor, but it is not an insignificant factor. If he was able to get up close and like if he managed to tackle Dooku to the ground and just started punching him, he'd win because holy fuck, it's Darth Maul tackling you to the ground and punching you in the face. But if Dooku's able to keep him at arm's length with lightsaber combat, which I'm certain he would, that's what his style is designed to do, what's Maul going to do to him?
Yeah, and his force abilities more than make up the difference in other areas anyway. So even if he didn't have his saber, he could still kick his ass with the force, even just augmentation level. The speed difference.
Tactile telekinesis, tactile lightning. I will rest my hand against your face and blast you with lightning. Ah, the burns!
Yeah, it wouldn't end well for Maul on any level.
It's like, oh, you can't do lightning, can you? Well, yeah.
And you can't block it very well with this double-sided saber either. Not compared to the single.
What you need to understand is that Maul, he's a Sith Lord in name only. What he is Palpatine's indoctrinated cult follower who is given a Sith title to keep him quiet. But in terms of how his actual skill set is developed, like the powers he has, well, he's not Sith. He's like a Dark Jedi Sentinel.
Yeah, and this isn't just Connor's opinion, guys. If you read the Darth Plagueis novelization, Plagueis and Sidious literally, they discuss Maul's training, and Plagueis literally says, you could train this guy to be a fighting machine, but he never trained him to be a true Sith Lord. Even Palpatine's like, yeah, okay. I mean, he didn't have the potential to become one anyway. So there you go.
It's just a carrot on a stick, isn't it? With Maul.
pretty much.
Which is a shame for the
The
character,
bloodline
because
of
the
the
guy
Sith
really
will
gives
be
it.
purified again. I am the chosen one.
He really
No,
gives
you're
it his
not.
all, the poor guy. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's everything I think we can say on those two. Or that
So-
one, I guess.
Mhm.
And the very
Yeah,
last
see-
matchup on this list,
Is coming from my catalog, and another fairly infamous one. It is Darth Plagueis versus Obi-Wan Kenobi, a collaboration between myself and Connor. So we will both be giving our opinions on this one. Yeah, that guy. Anyway, again, our verdict still stands on this. This is mostly addressing a few complaints and a few things we would have done differently. However, before we get into that, I just want to get into one of the main complaints I've had with this one so far. Many people have, I guess, accusing, quote unquote, me and Connor of not taking Plagueis's feats into account in comparison to Kenobi's, and I just have something to say with that. Okay, let's take a look at, let's disregard, everything that's been said about Plagueis. Disregard Palpatine being like, "Oh, my master is so powerful," or Tennis being like, "You have the potential to rule." Ignore all of that. Let's just take a look at Kenobi and Plagueis and just their feats and what they have done. Kenobi, engagements with dozens upon dozens and untold amount of battle droids of various varieties, some of which have even been known to kill Jedi, like the Magna Guards. Lightsaber engagements with some of the most premier lightsaber duelists of the era, such as Anakin Skywalker, Dooku, and Asajj Ventress, some of which were even victories. And very ingenious tactical prowess, hailed as one of the greatest military generals, and has led fleet conflicts and ground forces to victory on multiple occasions, and has even engaged a person who at the time was considered the most dangerous bounty hunter in the galaxy, Jango Fett. Now let's look at Plagueis. Defeated a crew of pirates with no force abilities. Defeated Tenebrus's weak Bith Padawan by the skin of his teeth. Defeated a bunch of Maladians, forceless Maladians, and is roughly implied to have defeated a bunch of primitives on a planet.
yeah. The thing is
Is
that
it really, when you put those side by side, from where we're standing, it seems kind of obvious which one's superior.
yeah. Plagueis is kind of dealing with the exact same problems as Darth Bane. Because he's got to be covert ops schemer, he doesn't have much opportunity to rack up combat experience, and most of the people he's contending with are assassins and mercenaries sent to kill him by people he's pissed off. He's never fought in a war. He hasn't been put through the meat grinder of hard combat the way Kenobi has. It's like even his greatest combative showing, which was the assault on the Phobosy Lodge by the Maladians, it's like, yeah, his ability to power through that injury was impressive, and the Maladians themselves are nothing to thumb your nose at because they are stated to be experienced at engaging Jedi. However, that's not the same as fighting General Grievous. That's not the same
or
as the
Darth
Muslim
Vader.
soldier. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like even his fight with Darth Venemus, I would compare it to the final fight, the final bout between Darth Maul and Obi at the tail end of the Duel of Fates. It's like we're basically dealing with an opponent who is coming at him so ferociously and aggressively that he's able to make up for the skill differential by just being ruthless and good at what he does, but not as good, but ultimately just got overwhelmed by Plagueis' force abilities. Like Plagueis is definitely nothing.
Sorry.
Plagueis is definitely nothing to thumb your nose at, like I'm saying. But the problem is that he doesn't have enough experience, and he doesn't have the right kind of experience, and he's operating under his own laundry list of conceits.
And that brings us into something we wish to explain a little bit better in the video, that being how Kenobi's greater skill matches up against Plagueis' inhibition, which we explained.
Because the thing is that,
agree or not, Kenobi's not only a better lightsaber duelist than anyone Plagueis has ever engaged. That's just a fact. He's also way more experienced, and then you add that on to the fact, that he's not exactly weak when it comes to force abilities. So And then you add in Plagueis' inhibition to use his force abilities.
Yeah, it's because, again, it's like Plagueis can't afford to cut loose with his powers because he can't risk exposing himself. The fight with the Meladians was the only time he ever did cut loose in a live combat situation because it was a do or die. And the other thing is that Plagueis' experience and approach to combat is actually very poorly suited for an engagement with Kenobi because Plagueis is accustomed to being the guy who's being attacked. He's accustomed to having his enemies coming at him, trying to kill him, because that's usually what it is. He's usually contending with assassins and mercenaries. He's not accustomed to stepping up as the aggressor against a duelist of comparable skill. It's like his entire fighting style is built it's built around weapon proficiencies, not dueling. He's training to combat assassins. He's training to combat aggressors. He's not training for a slugging match with someone who's just going to stand there and take it.
Which we probably should have explained a little better in the video itself. And another thing to take into account, because the common rebuttal to this is, oh, well, his inhibition wouldn't matter in a scenario where he's placed, 1v1, fight to the death. And here's the thing. If his first instinct is to hold back, it's not going to matter if he's confronted, if it is just a 1v1, because that moment of hesitation will still be there. Because it's part of him. It does not matter whatever the situation. Because even, let's look at the Venomous fight. Not only are there lines in the book where he wonders what the fight's going to be looking like shit, I better, this is bad. But he didn't just instantly, fry Venomous with a Force Storm, did he? No. It was a gradual buildup.
Yeah.
And that was because that's his instinct. That's how he operates.
Yeah. It's like, yes, if Plagueis knew about Kenobi's weak force defenses, he would just ragdoll him immediately. But
which we stated in the video.
Yeah, it's like if Plagueis knew about Kenobi's weaknesses, the fight is over. If you give Plagueis any prep time, he's screwed. But if you drop the two of them in cold with no knowledge of who the other is or what their capabilities are, it's like, at that point, it becomes a lightsaber duel. And if the duel does turn into a Mustafar duel-style slugging match where it goes on for half an hour, yes, Plagueis probably would break out his force powers and kill Kenobi. However, neither of us think the lightsaber duel would last that long because...
Not even close.
Yeah, because it's not that Plagueis is bad, it's just he's
inferior in that particular instance.
Yeah. So it's like he'd just be going at Kenobi, thinking he has the edge, because that's what Kenobi's style is designed to do. It's to make you think you have an edge, and all he has to do is just ramp it up. It wouldn't be a Mustafar duel thing. It would be more like Kenobi's duel with the Magna Guard IG-101 in Revenge of the Sith. It would be it would be Plagueis as the Magna Guard stepping up, attacking Kenobi, trying to pressure him, ramping things up a bit, and the second an opening appears, it's like, the thing about Kenobi is that as passive as he is one of the most shockingly brutal combatants in the setting. The second he has a chance to lay his blade on you, he's not just putting a little cut on the side of your neck the way Venomous did on Sojourn. He is reducing you to bite-sized chunks. Every single person that Kenobi has tussled with and beaten, well, almost every single person, Ventress has gotten away a few times, but every single person that Kenobi has tussled with, has beaten, has lost at least one limb, usually several.
Yeah, and it would be kind of difficult for Plagueis to unleash a Force Storm if he's bisected, now wouldn't it?
If he's a torso on the ground.
Yeah, no. And then there's another thing we should also consider is we have sort of seen examples of Kenobi's subversion tactics being applied against Plagueis successfully. I mean, not nearly to the same degree, but Pax-Teen was able to use subversion with the Meladians to surprise Plagueis. And Pax-Teen and the Meladians tactically aren't even on Kenobi's, it's not even on the radar comparing how skilled they are, intelligence-wise and tactically. So if they can get under Plagueis' guard, is there really any argument that Kenobi couldn't?
See,
I don't think so.
This is an interesting one because I fundamentally disagreed with the outcome of this. I still do to an extent, but I don't disagree with your assessment of the fight as a whole. I don't think that the examples of the feats you listed at the start have one-to-one parity. I don't think that.
Well, that was the point. I'm trying to show the disparity, Calvin.
Well, no, but that's what I mean. I don't think that the logic lines up on both sides quite evenly. But the thing with this is that, to me, Plagueis is overhyped massively. Most Sith Lords are overhyped, in my opinion, because of the way their feats and the information about them is presented, given the nature of the dark side and the books dedicated to these characters. Very rarely on the light side will you get a Jedi bigged up as much, because as a protagonist of their type, or as light side focus of their type, or the fact that they're usually not the main characters by themselves, they're usually an ensemble cast. You don't get anywhere near as much focus on what they are physically capable of and why that's impressive and why that's awesome, in the same way that you are with Sith Lords. That's why I think the feats that you can attribute to so many Sith Lords are so more more heavily explored. That's why I think Plagueis is overhyped. But personally, I don't think, as a combatant, purely as a combatant specifically, I mean, but I don't think that quite takes him to the point where he would be beaten by Kenobi for the same reason that Dooku isn't beaten by Kenobi. Because Dooku, while obviously way more advanced as a lightsaber duelist in terms of his presentation and his accolades, I don't think that Obi-Wan has been many times readily just taken out of the fight by Dooku. And I think it's essentially how it would happen with Plagueis, because I disagree with the idea that Plagueis wouldn't engage with... Yeah, he wouldn't engage first, but Obi-Wan because he's so defensively focused, he's not the type of... And also because his counters are so heavily reliant on the other person engaging them first, I don't think Plagueis is likely to try and go hammer and tongs against the kind of defense that Kenobi is going to be presenting, because Plagueis is going to be engaging, straight away going with a lightsaber, immediately noticing this, because he's not an idiot, immediately noticing the skill of Kenobi's defense, because he's while inexperienced, he's aware of the abilities of his opponents. We see almost all the time how he's analysing them, and before going into his blood rage mode. His blood rage tends to come after being wounded or being outmaneuvered in some way. To me, that's not going to happen before he starts unleashing the Force against Kenobi. And I think that's where the differences lie in the outcome. Most people would agree with me on that, on his Force abilities coming out sooner in the fight than you guys. But at the same time, if I agree with the argument that if he didn't lead with the Force abilities and got himself locked into a saber duel purely, Kenobi would be the victor, because I think Kenobi's skills in the saber, both logically and as they are presented in terms of feats, makes more of are just better than Plagueis's. But at the same time, a lot of people have the defense against that is because, Plagueis trains Sidious, and Sidious is one of the greatest lightsabers and duelists in the setting. And it's like, yeah, but that never made any sense to me.
Well, we already kind of debunked that in a video that ironically the three of us have done. So
yeah, well, debunked.
Yeah.
It comes down to personal preference, because to us, yeah, the setting explains that these are the greatest lightsaber duelists in the world. Plagueis is one of the greatest ever. Sidious is one of the greatest ever, based on what is stated. But it doesn't make sense to us because zero interest, zero experience. And it's pure dark side channeling that somehow makes them better than pretty much everyone else, which to me I don't personally enjoy, and I think for that reason that Plagueis is inferior to Kenobi on a purely martial level. But I just don't think that factors in too much when you've got the fact that he can contend at least a little bit before he just hammers him with the overwhelming force powers that he's got at his disposal. That's just me.
Well, my question to you, Callan, is why exactly do you think the Force abilities would come into play sooner? Because remember, even Dooku didn't break out the Force abilities until the latter half of their duel.
Because Dooku has overwhelming confidence
hand.
in his abilities with his saber to start with. Plagueis doesn't. It's just his first weapon of choice. He brings it up because that's just what he does for whatever reason that is. He doesn't personally put massive stock in his own ability to defeat anyone in a lightsaber duel. He will go up against. In my eyes, he'll clash against Kenobi. They'll have a few sequences exchanged, in which case Kenobi's completely on the defensive because that's what Kenobi does. Almost all of his fights do turn into slog matches. It's how he's designed. But for Plagueis, after
why wouldn't he be able to dispatch Plagueis in that instant, like we said with the Magna Guard?
Because Kenobi's not quite counter-riposte on that level. It's usually a case of, okay, defend, error, kill. I don't think Plagueis isn't going to be able to break his guard, I don't think he's going to be sloppily giving him an opening that early in the fight. He's good to me, and I think to most people, he will break off before he makes an error that Kenobi can exploit. And that's when the Force abilities come in, and that's when Obi-Wan gets turned to paste because Plagueis is just that powerful with the Force.
Well, I mean, how much more powerful do you think Plagueis is than Kenobi? Because,
well, I mean, in terms of sheer power output, I think vastly, just by the nature of his personal application of the Force as a Darksider. I don't think that Kenobi is bringing the sheer level of oomph that Plagueis is on any level. Because, again, Kenobi is very passive. His strength in the Force comes through the natural flow, the natural connection to it, and how that influences his personal physical actions. It's why he's so masterful with Surisu more than anyone else. It's that personal faith in the Force to act for him, effectively. But with Plagueis, it's, he's all about the intellectual hammer he's bringing to the table. A hammer that Kenobi is known to be weak against in application.
I think this is definitely one of those fair enough, but I disagree scenarios because I do see Kenobi as being just a little bit more active than that. It's not just capitalizing on the opponent's
I agree
errors.
too.
It's like the bit where he cuts off the Magna Guard's head. It's like that was an active, counter and riposte move. That wasn't just, the Magna Guard overextended and I cut off his head. It was literally, okay, it's like he literally just turned around, attacked, engaged the Magna Guard staff, pinned it against the control console, and then hacked off his head. It's like it was an active counter, and he did that early on.
And even then, he not just active countering, he could take an offensive stance, period. Like in Clone Wars, the Clone Wars comics, Volume 6, he's fighting Ventress. He jumps at her, deflects two of her blades, and kicks her right in the face off the back of her Rancor. It's pretty aggressive.
I completely get that, but these are opponents that are either vastly inferior to him, or he's fought many, many times and has their kind of flow in mind. He's not his typical mindset and approach when engaging people he's either unfamiliar with or he's not afraid of, but wary of. He is to fall back on a defense and wait until they either slip up or he has their momentum and their flow down pat, and he can counter it. Respond. If he's up against someone who's nearly as good as him, he will almost always take that back foot response and willingly, I'm not saying he gets pushed on that back foot, but willingly takes the defensive and lets them come at him. That's just his MO.
Yeah, but he's very counter-centric. Like, he counters almost immediately.
Yeah, if he's given something to counter against, which I don't think Plagueis in the early salvos is going to be giving him, personally.
I mean, do remember when his fight with Venemus just started, Venemus was able to penetrate his defenses and score a hit on his neck, like, instantly.
Oh yeah, and that's why I think he's massively overhyped, Plagueis. I do think that is the case. But to me, that's a very aggressive Juyo style kind of style. It's not like defending counter. It's he's too clinical and too precise to give an opening that would be counterable that early on into a fight for me, I think.
But he has.
Well, he has against a guy who is actively trying to pressure him.
Yeah. That's my point. It wasn't a defensive counter that he was losing to. It wasn't he's doing this, therefore I'll do this. It's a case of, oh god, he's immediately swooping in and attacking me on the Zero style, which is the exact opposite of what Obi-Wan is. And that's the only reason.
Well,
again,
we should probably say here, like Venemus isn't confirmed as a Juyo specialist.
Well, of course, but that kind of aggressive style, as an example, it was just
right. I know. I thought we'd point that out before anyone says anything.
Of course, yeah. It's again purely speculation on that front, but and I'd have to look back to see if I agree with that anyway. But it just the basic idea, if a Juyo specialist comes at him at high speed, pressuring him, that's going to knock him back and maybe not allow him to draw on his force abilities as readily. But because of Obi-Wan's personal approach, I just don't see him as someone who has really much chance overall. But I definitely see all your points, and the argument you made about how if that did play out like that, I completely buy that Plagueis would be the one to go down, because Plagueis in a lightsaber duel is not, or purely lightsaber duel is not someone who kind of ranks that highly in my mind. But it just comes down to differing opinions on how it would execute. People in the comments, leave your thoughts on these and the other matchups we've discussed. Let us know what you think on these. Any final points you want to close on before we wrap up, guys?
I think we covered everything with all of these, so yeah.
Well, I think just as a quick sort of general comment, it was very nice to kind of go back and revisit some of my older work and just reminisce on what I've learned.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to do that. I mean, I know for a fact that looking back on my early videos, because I've done so many of them, guys.
Big catalog.
Yeah, there's a big difference between the now and the then. To the point where I'm literally embarrassed of the quality of the originals, because you learn so much very quickly with these. I find like just doing one or two, and you'll have learned like a library's worth of mistakes that you've made.
Definitely, we're always trying to improve the quality for you guys.
Yes, of course, yeah, and just for ourselves as well, because it's nice to watch them.
I'm building an edifice to my ego.
Oh God.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, on that lovely note, I think we will sign off. Evanova 95. We hope you guys enjoyed. We'll see you guys later.
Genserai 1 signing off. Have a nice day.
I'm ready for, and I still don't have an outro. Goodbye.